Hey, deserving listeners, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to provide an announcement because we are giving out a scholarship for our 14th anniversary this year in 2020. So if you are particularly a graduate student in the field of psychology, psychotherapy, social work, that sort of thing, then you want to go to the website, psychologyinseattle.com, click on the scholarship button, and submit your essay there. The deadline is July 15th. The amount will be $3,000, I believe. I'm pretty sure 3,000. So go to the website, submit your application, your essay. You can also tell your friends and family, other people who might be interested in that. We are looking for, like I said, primarily a graduate student in the field of psychology or psychotherapy or counseling or social work who has made a positive impact on the world in the past and is going to make a positive impact on the world in the future and has a need for that scholarship. So submit your essays. Again, July 15th. And by the way, our 14th anniversary live stream will be the weekend of September 17th and 18th. So tune in on YouTube for that. Let's watch the show.
Is this really happening?
What, me pumping right here in the living room?
This is not normal. You can't be doing this like in front of your parents as well.
I've done it for my parents for 17 months.
Okay, so I don't know what's happening right now, but or if this is just a minor blip in their relationship, but you know, Kobe last week was this beacon of humanity in his just, you know, unbridled tears and crying and sobbing at the sight of his son in person for the first time. And I thought, what a wonderful guy, what a wonderful example of humanity, and then instantly wondered if things were going to take a turn later and I was going to have to not see him as at least an overall beacon of humanity. And right off the bat, in the beginning of this episode, we're seeing him do this. You know, I don't know what this means, but he, I think, just arrived at the house this day and is immediately criticizing her for pumping and not in front of her parents. Like, she says, look, I've been pumping in front of them for 17 months, so what's the big deal? Plus, what would be the reasons? Now, I'm guessing there's a cultural reason, and of course, in the States, there's so much breast phobia in our society that so anyway, now I don't know about Kobe and his culture and what is typically done, but we have to accept that breastfeeding and breasts and pumping is a regular part of human life, and there's no shame in it, and we have to look at the impulse we have around those things as possibly the patriarchy and misogyny and sexism and denial of, I mean, what comes to mind is denial of sexuality, but of course it has nothing to do with sex. It's feeding your child. So this idea of in our culture in the United States that anything involving the breast is somehow sexual, and it's like, no, certainly it can, but not when we're looking at these situations. So he's saying, don't do that. Now, he's not yelling at her, and so hopefully he'll go, oh, okay, well, what do I know? And let's see what happens.
The fact that your parents let you do it doesn't mean it's right.
Everyone's seen me pump before.
That doesn't mean, but do you think it's the right way? Do you think
Where am I
that's what
supposed to go? Downstairs?
Of course. Why can't you do that in the basement?
Because I don't need to go to the basement to pump.
Yeah, okay. Well, so hopefully he will pull out of this nosedive and realize he doesn't know what he's talking about. He can certainly have a preference, I guess, but I don't know. When you pump, you got to pump. Plus, it's, you know, there's all the gear and stuff. Plus, go in the basement, like, why? Because you're this shameful, disgusting thing, and you got to hide your body and your process in the dark of the basement. Yeah, I don't know. He's not being intimidating, so it sounds like he'll adjust.
I don't think Kobe's ever seen anyone pump before, so to him it was very strange. Everyone in my family knows how hard my breastfeeding journey was. It was super difficult for me. So the fact that I'm able to produce milk now when I wasn't in the beginning is something I'm really proud of, and I'm not ashamed to do it in front of my family. I'm not going to go downstairs.
Okay, another factor here for her, that she had some complications and she doesn't feel ashamed of it, and she might even feel kind of proud of it. People should be proud of that. I mean, to be able to produce food from your body that will give your child nourishment is a miracle. So, yeah, be proud of it.
Maybe you might have been
Do they
doing
not
it
pump
in
in
the past.
Africa?
They do pump, okay? Listen to me.
You've never seen it?
I've never seen it, but I know they do pump, okay? But what if somebody come and visit, like, are you still going to sit there like that? At least you should listen to me.
All right, I don't know where he's coming from, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is a misogynistic, patriarchal idea of men owning the woman's body, and of, so that, and also just cultural notions of what is indecent. And there are places in the world where women are considered indecent and disgusting and vulgar if they show their hair, which, you know, is their culture, and that's fine. But if it's based on suppression, and do people have a choice in the matter, is always the question I have. So anyway, I don't know where Kobe's coming from, but I'm just going to call out those factors. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's pathological or a huge problem to have these ideas in your culture, to have different mores and expectations about things, but especially when you're cross-cultural in a relationship and you're dealing with the reality. You know, it'd be one thing if she just wanted to, you know, she's like, look, I'm proud of my naked body, so I'm going to walk through the mall naked or something. You know, there's not a need for that. It's not a necessity. But when it comes to breastfeeding and feeding your child, there's a practical necessity to it, and hiding away in the basement would add a whole series of steps to the process. She wouldn't be able to have conversations, maybe wouldn't be able to hear if you know, Coben is taking a nap, you know, just so hopefully they'll pull out of this.
Why can't you try it?
In Africa, do women go to the room to feed them?
They do.
So you think I should just pump in private when I don't even breastfeed in private?
Can you at least try it that way?
It's normal, like, okay, a mom that has to breastfeed her child. What you do, it also matters. I mean, in Africa, women will be a little more discreet.
Okay, so fine, but you're not there. 1, 2, why? And this is the word of the oppressor, which is, it's normal. It's not normal. That's abnormal. It's not normal to do that. And of course, in the past, there were all sorts of things that were considered not normal, like being gay, or being married if you're gay, or having kids if you're gay. All those things were considered abnormal. So just saying it's not normal is not convincing. In fact, one could argue that if you say that, it's a good indication that you should immediately question that assertion, because it's normal to be racist. It's normal to be sexist.
You could equally choose to go to the basement or your room and do this.
You see, your father is right here. I don't think that's appropriate for you to be pumping in front of your dad.
Well, I don't think he really cares.
That doesn't mean it's right.
Okay, whatever, Kobe.
Yeah, I mean, he's not bringing up any convincing arguments. He's saying it's not right, it's not normal, you shouldn't do it in front of your dad. She's like, I don't think he cares. That doesn't mean it's right. Is it a religious thing? If he had some... If he said something like, look, in my religion, that's considered to be vulgar and it's against God. Well, I mean, that doesn't make any sense logically, but at least it has some kind of precedent to it. But just to claim, in my country, I haven't seen this before, is, you know, it's not convincing. And good on Emily for just saying, well, I hear you, but I'm not convinced.
Why don't you have a seat instead of just standing there?
I don't want to get in the middle of a first discussion here.
Oh my God.
Discussion about my boobs.
I'm so sorry.
Well, that's all right. That's all right. I just, you know.
Oh my God.
We do things a little bit different here. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with this,
Yeah.
so.
See? Nothing wrong with it.
I wasn't brought up like that.
I guess another random factor in Kobe's feelings could be that because he specifically said you're not supposed to do that in front of your dad. Does that mean that there's a cultural taboo about dads seeing their daughter's breasts or knowing they exist or something? Or does Kobe have some kind of things, has some sort of history around that issue being breached of some sort? I don't know. But yeah, I get the impulse, but I don't get doubling down on it after she said everyone here is fine with it. I'm fine with it. My family's fine with it. So you're the only one, and you're new here. So
My younger sister, she stopped breastfeeding when the son was like 7 months.
And that's normal?
It's normal.
You've heard me. I've gone down this road before. It's fine to breastfeed for however you feel like. People breastfeed way beyond what's considered to be normal. There are lots of studies on this. There is nothing wrong with breastfeeding, particularly at I don't even know how old Coben is. Must be less than 2 years. So yeah, it's fine. There are averages and there are standard deviations from that average, but we've looked at this, and what do we possibly think would be the problem of breastfeeding beyond what is considered to be normal? It's this paranoia about sexuality. It's ridiculous. You know, say you had a child that, let's just get away from the breasts, who really just love to cuddle with you, okay? So the child, when needs to have some physical touch, they sit on your lap, or they want to be picked up, or they just want to lean on you. We don't generally consider that to be sexual until the child hits puberty, by the way, which is why a lot of pubescent people, particularly boys, are completely neglected regarding touch, and thus turn all to sexuality to express the entirety of their physical affection needs, which of course leads to all sorts of problems. But just imagine that. So you have a child from 0 to 9 who, when just occasionally just comes and sits next to you, or wants to touch your hair, or wants you to hug them, or wants to cuddle, or wants to lay down at night to fall asleep, or wants you to go to bed with them and lie next to them and then they fall asleep. That would be sweet. That would be by some people considered to be abnormal and disgusting or inappropriate, and it's not. We come from a Victorian English culture in the United States primarily, and they were very weird people. Freud emerged out of that culture to some extent and challenged the whole thing, among a lot of other people. Of course, women's rights, all that, it was pushing back at it as well. The 60s, 70s had a big deal to do with it, love, and sometimes they went too far. Anyway, point is that most people would not look at that as a problem. Well, breastfeeding is very similar to that. And to think of it as a vast difference, to think of a child wanting a hug or to be picked up or to lie next to them while they fall asleep, to consider that over here, and then way over here is breastfeeding, and I'm thinking about it in terms of the soothing aspects of breastfeeding and the bonding aspects of breastfeeding for everyone involved, not just the child, but for the parent. So those things, to consider them way far apart, is not reflected in the data. It's not far apart. It's all in the same category. Do we think that 100,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, when people were breastfeeding, that they just sort of like put the kibosh on it? Now, there's often a necessity to the issue in that the parent will say, like, look, I can't, I've got to do other things, or I have another child, or, so there's absolutely a practical reason as to why parents will start pushing back. But to say that it's abnormal and pathological or problematic or harming a child to breastfeed, 18 months of age is part of the problem. part of our reason. We have increasing depression, increasing anxiety, increasing despair, increasing suicidal thoughts and attempts and completions. And this is, in my model, part of the problem. This idea of like, kids got to grow up fast, and and this disgust around touch and breastfeeding. So like, and yeah, I hesitate to tell you the range of breastfeeding age that I have in my mind of what is quote unquote appropriate and okay, because I'm guessing all of you would be shocked by what the research actually shows. Because there are people who breastfeed way beyond what you consider to be normal. Can a child be abused through this lack of boundary? Yes. Can you create problems? Sure. I mean, parenting is complicated, but just looking at the child's age and identifying it as a problem, particularly pre-2, is ridiculous. And if someone was spouting nonsense about, I don't know, the stars and the planets and the effect on the personality or whatever, to me, it's like, well, we could talk about it. But this is part of the problem. The ideas around parenting, the false ideas around parenting that results in damage to children is a huge problem, because those individuals that lack the, good enough parenting because of really effed up ideas in one's culture results in crime, drug abuse, dropout, domestic violence, early death, murder, attachment insecurity, lack of meaning in life, lack of happiness, marital conflict, bad parenting. So many things stem from our idiocy around what you're supposed to do, what's appropriate to do. So his face sums it up.
Babe, you've been breastfeeding for 17 months.
Yeah.
So how long?
I can't just
like,
cut
babe,
him off.
before coming even, I told you this, like, listen, I'm coming home. And you need to start thinking on how you're going to have to, like, stop him from breastfeeding.
Because he...
I think Emily has enough assertiveness to push back on this, and he's not being particularly aggressive. You see they're actually holding hands, or at least being affectionate in this moment. So I don't think this is out of control. It's not, I think, going to consume their relationship. But this is disappointing. Now, maybe over the next few episodes, he'll redeem himself as a beacon of humanity. But in this moment, it's hard to see it that way.
He wants that bond that Coben and I have, because it is such a bond, breastfeeding is a big bond, and I understand that, but it's like, I'm not going to take that away just because you're here.
This time around, it shouldn't be like it's only about you and him. It's like us.
Oh my God. I mean, yeah, of course, this is one of those factors, but for some reason, it just seems so ludicrous that it just doesn't even typically occur to me off the top of my head when I'm talking about this sort of thing. This, the ludicrousness of a father feeling jealous of a child getting their needs met and doing normal things like, breastfeeding, not only for nourishment. I mean, it's at this age, it's probably more for bonding and checking in with your parents, just be like, am I still loved? Are you still there for me? I want some affection with my mom. And, there's nothing wrong with saying, for Emily, not for Kobe, but for Emily to say, look, I'm going to start transitioning him away from breastfeeding and more towards checking in with me physically if he wants to hug or cuddle or talk or something. That's okay for her to say, because she can make her choice around that age for sure. But for Kobe to say this, it's now, okay, so we try to analyze this. He must be attachment insecure. It wouldn't be unusual to get off the plane and have a lot of vulnerability emerge. He is moving there, and he's alone, and his life is all discombobulated. It would be normal to regress and to have a lot of needs and just kind of have a transition period where you're more reactive during that time. So maybe that's what he's going through, and he feels jealous. So, and he doesn't, or he feels concerned. He isn't really connecting with her. So he's really focused on the breastfeeding thing, when more globally and what would be more likely is that, well, my memory of you in the past was I had you all to myself because we were in China and you didn't have any other people around. You certainly didn't have a child. And now I barely have you as a partner. You're always taking care of the kid, or you're doing something around the house, or your parents are around, and I'm kind of this fifth wheel. Okay, totally. But to tell her she can't breastfeed, to try to wedge yourself in between that, it's...
I'm just telling you like how things have been done from where I'm from, okay? Maybe some we go to the 8, 9, 10 months, but it's rare to see a mother breastfeeding at the age of even 1 year.
Fine, it's rare, but it's in your culture, 1. 2, show me the data. Whenever anyone ever tells you some rule or principle about what's normal and they point to culture to back up their claim, you should always be skeptical and think, well, or say, I'd love to see the data. Show me the research. Because they've researched it. Google it. In fact, let's do it now. All right, so I just spent a long time reading lots of research, and I didn't do obviously a comprehensive review of the medical and psychological literature and research regarding this topic, but what I will say is that there's no indication that breastfeeding well beyond the age of 2 will cause a problem. Now, I also want to say that there's nothing wrong with weaning your child at 6 months or not ever breastfeeding your child. The main thing is that you have proper attachment with your child, and breastfeeding can facilitate that. There are some potential health benefits also to breastfeeding over other forms of feeding, but the research there is a little spotty, and it depends on all the, parenting and nutrition is very complicated. Of course, you can raise healthy kids and psychologically healthy kids without breastfeeding them at all. And also, you can breastfeed your kid way beyond the age of 2, 3, 4, and also see no results that indicate that that's a factor in the problem. Now, I'm guessing that for some families, if that's happening, something else is wrong. It's not really the problem, but there's an overall chaos in the family, or the parents don't know how to draw boundaries for themselves or something like that. But that's, breastfeeding late isn't the problem. It's a symptom of a larger problem, if you know what I mean. So I just want to say that there's lots of ways of raising a healthy child. You can never breastfeed or breastfeed till they're 6 years old. There are some cultures where they breastfeed until the age of 10. And that's normal. That's normal in that culture, and they don't see any problems in those children's psychological health. Of course, when you're 7 years old and you're breastfeeding, it's not like a long thing. It's usually very brief, and it's a way of bonding for not only, so the other factors we got to think of is the parent. When you are breastfeeding or feeding in any form, but breastfeeding, maybe it's particularly facilitated, you feel better if it's a mutual and it's consensual and you're okay with it and you have the time for it. It's a way for you to feel good about bonding with your child. So your mood is elevated, thus making you better able to be more resilient and able to parent your child more, and better able to be a better spouse. You know, like there's not just benefit. We just don't necessarily want to think about the kid, but the feedback loop, the benefits between parent and child. Now, I didn't get into the weeds that much on the research. As I said earlier, can we find examples, if we cherry pick examples of families where breastfeeding was beyond the average point of weaning, that are clear examples of child abuse that's happening, or raising a child that doesn't understand boundaries, or raising a child that feels entitled to bodies, that sort of thing? Yeah, we could cherry pick those, but when you look at the overall data, there's no signal there. And we got to add that to the conversation as well and I've worked with families around this, that is one of the benefits of doing in-home family therapy, is that I would see the way that the family interacted in the real world. And sometimes I would see kids that were older who just felt like they had total access to the mother's body without asking for permission, and I knew the mother was not happy about it, and also didn't feel like she could do anything about it. So she would just kind of stiffen. And I would say, so that's the problem, right? Is this lack of assertiveness on the mother and this sense of entitlement on the children. That, of course, is fine when they're 18 months, but when they're 6 years old, you know, you want to start to teach ways of having at least some empathy and some care about what other people are thinking before you just invade their space. And so breastfeeding could be another symptom of that overall problem. But anyway, so put it to rest, people. There's no right way to wean a child. There's no right age. It's up to you for the most part. And the primary concern is bonding, attunement, attachment, safety, relationship, with or without breastfeeding, with breastfeeding occasionally for a long period of time. It's fine. Get it out of our heads that it's disgusting or inappropriate or damaging to children. It's not. It's not.
Like, seriously.
Not in America.
Oh my God.
Longer the better.
See? Longer the better.
I mean, that's not true. Longer the better. And earlier weaning is also not necessarily better. So you can say we can do either, and that's how we like to do it. And we want that option of that bonding and that relationship. We like that, you know, as a family. And Emily likes that, so we support her. But to say that longer is superior is, you know, it's also not necessarily true.
I think Kobe was wrong completely. I mean, it's perfectly natural for Emily to want to do what she needs to do to pump the milk, and you know, she's still breastfeeding, and that's pretty natural here. I was kind of forceful,
and it's disappointing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't know how disappointing it is. Again, the demeanor that Kobe has is not intimidating. He's not bulldozing. He's not seemingly getting, you know, he's not involving the four horsemen: criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling, and contempt. He is, I think, wrong in terms of the science, but you know, I didn't see any attack personally. He wasn't saying you're a bad mother or this family is screwed up, or throwing his hands up and walking out of the room and slamming something down. Like, we're not seeing that. So, you know, couples have conflict, and as long as they're at this level, it won't erode their relationship. And Emily was like, nope, I hear you, but not going to happen. And I think Kobe will live with that. Sounds like it, I hope.
I'm sorry to say this, but
What?
we are talking about my son, okay?
Our son.
Our son. Yeah.
seems to be doing pretty good.
She's going to be my wife, and we make love, you know, and I have to suck her breast because I love breasts, to be honest.
What is wrong with people like this? We've seen this before, have we not, on this show? To compare the two, and what? Like, fine. Great. You liked to have sex with your wife, and, well, they're not married yet, right? And you like to get involved in some breast stuff, and great. Put that on a shirt. And, okay, what does that have to do with her breastfeeding? Nothing. Now, maybe he's thinking like the shape of her breasts have to do with breastfeeding, which, you know, they often will, not always. Okay. It's a temporary thing at the beginning of life for a young child, and there's other ways of, you know, having mommy and daddy time, or, you know, you just sort of adjust for it. But, and then this attitude of, you know, I hate to say this, but, you know, he says, I hate to say this, but I have to pull rank. He's my son. And it's, really? You've never parented a child before, and you land in the States and suddenly you're putting your foot down. And it's like, I am now in charge. I'm guessing that's a cultural thing. And he's also saying that your body is mine and you can't do this. Like, it's starting to be ugly to me.
All right. So I can be sharing breasts and with my son. You know what I mean? So I don't want to sound being selfish over here, but that's just the truth.
Now, he says it with a smile. So are the producers like prodding him to, but he's saying it, you know, I remind myself this sometimes cast members will have conversations with me and I will talk off the record with them. And one of the things that's universal, and people also reach out to me who have been on other reality shows that I don't react to and tell me about what goes on behind the scenes. And universally, they'll say that, yeah, there's absolutely a storyline that they're kind of shooting for, and there's some influence from the producers. There's some situational influence that push people in a particular direction. There's editing, da-da-da. But what they also will say is, but the things you see me doing, I did those things, so I can't, you know, they didn't make me do that. I might have been influenced a little bit, but I still stood behind what I was doing at the time. I look back and think that's pretty regrettable, but I did those things. So that's another thing to think about. It's like, well, it could be fake on some level, but on another level, it's like, you know, like I always think about Mike and Natalie, Squim, and Mike, frequently I was interpreting him as pushing back on the producers because he gave such minimal answers to questions, and he was so careful about what he said that I guessed that he was just the whole time feeling the pressure and saying stubbornly, I'm not going to do that, which I get. But anyway, so who knows? But he's saying, I don't want to, you know, come across as selfish or anything, but I don't want my son to breastfeed during a normal span of time of breastfeeding, even though he's probably not breastfeeding very often. Honestly, at 17 months, it's probably not. I mean, it surely isn't as much as when Coben was 2 months old, right? I mean, I'm just going to take a guess because most 17-month-old children would rather be doing other things. So you're in competition with those moments. Yeah. Now, if he's insecure and he wants affection and he feels lonely and he's worried about the distance, fine. But to, you know, focus on this one issue as the solution, which people will do. You know, in fact, I often will be talking with clients about this issue. I'm frequently asking clients, like, what are your needs? You know, really think about who are you, get in connection with what, well, follow along with me. Think about, look to your heart, look to your gut, and think about what do you need, like an emotional need, whether it be closeness, affection, sex, sustenance, safety, entertainment, self-esteem, productivity, meaning, purpose, reassurance, self-worth, compliments. Think about what you need, you know, those sorts of things. And then think about how you go about meeting those needs. Often people will choose very indirect, ineffective ways of trying to meet that need. For example, if you have a need for self-esteem, you might you might be overly focused on how you look before you leave the house. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. But if that's all you're doing and it's not really working out, you know, like when you walk out of the house, there's not a lot of people going like, you are a very worthwhile human being. You know, maybe people will look at you, maybe people will think you're attractive or something, and maybe that meets your self-esteem needs, but, you know, does it? So you just want to look at that, you know, what really is my need? Because we usually avoid direct ways because we did that when we were young and we got rejected or ridiculed or something. And so we just don't think it's going to work out. So we go other directions. So I wonder if Kobe is looking for affection and closeness, and he's laser focused on the breast thing because he doesn't believe he can be more direct based on his relational traumas. That's my hope, honestly. Otherwise, we're moving further and further away from, a beacon of humanness.
We still have like 90 days. We could get into a lot more fights.
I know. Serious ones, even.
We're having this first fight about the breastfeeding and the pumping. It was kind of awkward that it, got brought up today and in front of my parents. Like, I don't like that. This is day one. Like, who knows what's going to happen on day 22.
Now, I will say that the way everyone handled it was, comparatively to other families that we've seen on the show, on the healthy end of the spectrum. For Emily, she asserted herself. She also didn't engage in the Four Horsemen. She didn't criticize. She didn't say, well, you don't have any power, or, well, you don't know what you're talking about, or you're not American. This is how we do it here. Not these sort of blanket statements. And the father was sort of looming around and wasn't butting in. He had an appropriate level of awkwardness. The mom across the room also not getting involved, because there wasn't really a need to. Emily was handling herself perfectly fine. They're not seemingly ganging up on him or anything, or calling anyone names. I mean, think about Cole and Larissa and Debbie. Imagine them having a conversation like this. We can't. And so I will say that there's a lot of strengths there that I'm seeing that's very encouraging, because there's always this concern. We heard something from the dad last week of like, I'm watching him. And I'm like, is that racist? I don't know. I don't want to. I mean, of course, you're concerned about your daughter, but I don't know. It just always kind of rings that bell for me. I'm just like, is that xenophobia? I don't want to accuse him of that. But anyway, and of course, he's concerned. He would worry about his daughter. Fine. But I don't know. I don't want to accuse him of anything. But anyway, I was just kind of like, ugh. Like, think of Rebecca and Zied, Rebecca's daughter's husband, remember him? And how he was, I think he literally said something like, well, Muslims, or anyway. So overall, I think they're doing really well, and let's appreciate that, and Emily in particular, because she could really be problematic in this moment, and she's not. She's just saying, well, I hear you, but that's not how it's going to be.
If this already is happening, why don't you just go help cook dinner with my mom?
Listen to me. I don't want you to sound as if, you're trying to be controlling because I'm in America or not. It doesn't really happen this way. You're trying to be very, very disrespectful.
Seriously about to come over there and just lose my on you.
All right. Well, I spoke too soon. I don't know. I'm getting a vibe that this is not super rageful and triggering. I mean, it's starting to get on Emily's nerves, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm just trying to look with glass half full, but a pump half full. So for Emily, so for Kobe, he's like, you're trying to control me, you're disrespecting me, and she's getting fed up. So it is escalating, which I guess I should always just count on things getting horrible during the season, because it always starts, they're hugging in the airport, and then by the end of the season we're just like, oh my goodness. All right, well, I want to announce that there's a new thing called Super Thanks on YouTube. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it's like Super Chat, in that you give money to have a highlighted comment or a thank you in the comment section below. I'm not sure how it works. Totally up to you, of course. You don't have to do it, but if you want to, that's available. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.